A woman fell to her death from the 8th floor onto a car late at night, completely naked. The Special Crimes Unit immediately took on the case. Initial investigations revealed no signs of forced entry into the victim's room. 2 wine glasses were half full of red wine. A box of opened, ultra-thin condoms was found in the cupboard. 2 sets of clear fingerprints were also found. The shattered glass suggests this was likely a premeditated murder. If it were suicide, the victim would likely have opened the window first. But could someone really lift and throw a victim weighing 40 to 50 kilograms out the window? Back at the station, the victim's information was quickly retrieved. Her name was Gretchen. She was 32 years old. She was a long-term contract writer for the New York Times. Her notepad also contained a recent appointment. She had appointments with a psychologist every Tuesday and Thursday. This suggests she may have had long-term mental health issues. Neighbors in the same building reported that, before the incident, they heard things being thrown around in her apartment. This was followed by screams, impacts, and a car alarm. But there was no other useful information. There were no messages on her answering machine. No threatening letters from an ex-boyfriend were found among her documents. No one claimed her body even days after the incident. It was as if Gretchen had severed all ties with the world. Benson and Taylor decided to take the initiative. They contacted the editor-in-chief of the New York Times. Surprisingly, the editor said he'd never met Gretchen. Their communication had always been by phone. Looking at Gretchen's youthful and attractive photograph, however, the editor had a strange feeling. If they'd met in person, such a beautiful woman would have been captivating. They then visited Gretchen's psychologist. The psychologist informed them that Gretchen's parents were deceased. She only had a sister, Ally, who lived in Denver. She seemed forthcoming and cooperative with the investigation. But the perceptive Benson noticed a detail. She hadn't asked about Gretchen's death. She was clearly trying to keep the conversation short. The incident report was soon available. The victim had multiple lacerations from glass. Her neck, ribs, and cervical vertebrae were broken. Strangely, these injuries were post-fall. There were no signs of a struggle. There were no abrasions on her body. This increased the mystery surrounding the incident. With the investigation stalled, forensics provided crucial information. Fingerprints on the wine glasses matched the psychologist. Confronted with the evidence, the psychologist was no longer calm. He had hired a lawyer before Benson arrived. The lawyer interrupted whenever key questions were asked. He was afraid of incriminating statements. But under persistent questioning from Benson and Taylor, the psychologist could no longer hide the truth. He claimed he was discussing life with a female colleague. The colleague corroborated his story. They were together until 1:30 a.m. The psychologist was cleared of suspicion. Using Gretchen's last credit card transaction, Benson and Taylor found a nearby restaurant. Showing their badges, they prompted the waiter's memory. He remembered Gretchen that night. With a television news anchor, the waitress identified him as Warner. Gretchen paid the tip. It was a large tip, so he remembered it well. Unexpectedly, Warner didn't deny it. He admitted to having a relationship with Gretchen. He also knew the psychologist had done the same. He was remarkably unconcerned. He showed no remorse for Gretchen's death. Only when Benson mentioned his wife did he shut up. With his relationship with the patient exposed, the psychologist confessed everything. During the first session, he noticed that Gretchen showed classic signs of childhood sexual abuse. This led to complicated adult relationships. She repeatedly asked if she was attractive. It all stemmed from when she was 13 years old. Her father began sexually abusing her for several years. She left home after graduating high school. She moved every few years. This explains her lack of social connections. When Benson mentioned the high cost of therapy, the psychologist revealed crucial information. Gretchen had a large trust fund, but she said she'd never touch it. Back at the station, the trust fund was investigated. Gretchen hadn't touched any of the money. It had continued to grow. It had reached $3.5 million. The fund's creator was her father. Gretchen had lied. Her father was alive. Benson and Taylor followed the leads. They found a crime scene in New Jersey. Gretchen's father, Sitas, owned the place. Upon hearing of his daughter's death, Sitas was emotional and tearful. His wife and 9-year-old daughter were on vacation. He had remarried and started a new family. Hearing Gretchen's name, he felt relieved. He showed no remorse for his daughter. Benson was so angered by his indifference that he wanted to slap him right then and there. Even if he were guilty, the statute of limitations had long expired. Taylor thought that might be the end of the case. But Benson refused to give up, because even if Sitas wasn't the killer, he was still worried about the 9-year-old girl. No one could predict whether she would suffer the same abuse as Gretchen. Their only hope was to find Gretchen's sister, Erin. Perhaps she could provide some unknown evidence, but Erin's attitude was unexpectedly cold. Even for her own sister, she didn't want to get involved. This gave the perceptive Benson a terrible suspicion. He had to seize the last chance and try his best to persuade Erin.
The same thing that happened to you, Mrs. Travis.
It was her drama, not mine.
Please, Mrs. Travis, just listen to me. It's your drama, too. Now, please, we can help.
I have to go.
Just one more day. In a lifetime.
Finally, Benson successfully persuaded Ally. At the police station, she loudly accused her so-called biological father. She revealed the painful scars buried deep in her heart for decades. Facing death, Cedars mentioned the trust fund he had set up for the two sisters. But Ally, like Gretchen, had never touched it. Now, she just wanted to send this man to prison. According to Megan's law, if the memory from years ago was reawakened, the statute of limitations on psychological abuse could be recalculated, and Cedars would finally pay the price for his heinous acts. Finally, Ally produced Gretchen's will.
Gretchen Quinn, born Susan Sodarsky, a frequent contributor to the New York Ledger, committed suicide Monday night. She hopes her death will point an accusing finger at the men responsible.
What is this?
Susie's obituary, she wrote it herself. She is survived by her ex-boyfriend, Dallas Warner, who was perfect, who knew her inside and out, literally and biblically. And last but not least, Robert Zdarsky, her father. She was 30.